Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's a good time to start the meeting at 2 o'clock. Welcome to the special meeting or special workshop meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Mayor Bob Severance cannot be with us today, so we'll go ahead and start the meeting by introducing ourselves around the table. I'll go ahead and start and then go to my left. I'm Danny Pagao, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jim Campbell, City Council.
Tara Heisen, City Council.
Rick Alberg, City Council.
Doug Merriman, City Administrator.
Joel Cervidia, City Council.
Erica Wassinger, City Council.
Thank you, and also we have some staff members outside the table. And please introduce yourself. Start with Mr. Powers.
Steve Powers, Director of Home Services.
Kathy Rosen, Public Works Director.
Liz Lane, Program Coordinator at the Senior Center. Mary Anderson, Senior Services Administrator.
Barry Winnes, Assistant Programs.
And let's see, Emma.
Emma's hiding in the corner.
HR.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And we'll start right off with the first item from City Administrator and Senior Services.
Okay, I'll go ahead and run with this one. First thing I wanted to do though, before we get into the agenda items, is if you notice the agenda looks a little bit different this time. And what we're starting to do is reformat our agenda for the workshop based on what we talked about in the council retreat. So we've broken this down now by function, so you'll see administration, public works, development services, and so on. And we've given our best guesstimate as far as where to throw a dart for how much time it will take. So notice we've put our disclaimer up above the heading that says, please note these are estimated times. So we want to see how this works. At 4:30, assuming we go that long to that point, City Council has the opportunity then to just have a free open discussion time. That's one of the things, again, we wanted to add from the council retreat that we had. So starting off then, it is almost 2:05, but I'll kick this off. The first item we have is a very important one. That's why it's top of the list today. And that is we have a lot of volunteers from the senior services area that do a lot of work for us during the year. I think Mary's going to give you a little bit of information on how many hours they all put in and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mary
Thank you.
to take this one.
Well, this is probably the best honor of my time since I
Could
started.
you put the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm incredibly excited and honored to introduce these folks to you, these wonderful women. We do have, I think, about 6 or 8 that are not here. In the last 12 months, our volunteers have donated about 8,000 hours of their time. And at a modest $12 an hour, that would be close to $100,000 equivalent in time. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the center would not even be able to open, much less run, without this team. So I'm really proud to present them to you and give you an opportunity during this National Volunteers Week to say thank you. Thank you very much for everything you've done. And we're going to recognize each one with a certificate, and I'll hand them to, and just ask each of you to stand as Barry or Liz brings you the certificate. So Susan Bowe.
Do you want us to remain standing or
You know what? That's a big decision. You can make that. So they make all the big decisions, and we make the little ones. When they get to we get to decide which ones are big and which ones are little. Lorraine Brandon.
Thank you.
Cookie Carruthers. Thank you, Cookie. Betty Diassi. Thanks, Betty. Barbara Green. Heather Habeb. Terry Hoskins. Sandra Martinson. Helen McDaniel. Mary McYoung? Two to come over? Okay. They all had cake and things before they came here, so I guess she figured that was the. Carol Meyer? Mary Jo Morris? Shirley Rasmussen? Let's see this one. Mary Ann Taylor? Thanks, Mary Ann. Thank you. Margaret Vasquez? Our very newest volunteer, Pam Reinhardt, so new that we don't have her certificate yet, but we will shortly. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to our volunteer who will be celebrating her 30th year of service to the Senior Center this year, and that's Marta Stitcher. You're welcome. Thank you all. Thank you.
I would like to thank you all and volunteer. Your volunteer work provides a good quality of life for Oak Harbor and contribute to make this city a better place to live. Anyone else? There. Go ahead. Ms. Hyson?
I just want to say that, staff and City Hall, we take care of a lot of details, but truly it's volunteers like you who keep this community running and make it a better place. So thank you for giving your time to make our community a better place. It means more than I could ever say. Thank you.
Let's give him a big round. And now,
Back to work. I know. Who do we have to know to get a vest like that?
And now, continuing on our agenda, under administration, this is the lodging tax fund balance. Dr. Merriman?
Give them just a quick second to take out. They said there was still cake at the senior center, so if we could move this meeting along, that would be great. Over there. Okay, this next item is the lodging tax fund balance, and Mr. Sebadius had asked if we can bring this forward at some point. We're going to be looking at our LTAC committee getting together here pretty soon to start our next grant process. And we've also had conversations when we're talking about Windjammer Park and other projects we have going on. Are those good opportunities to be using some of our lodging tax funds? As you know, we've had a balance we've carried forward. There were a couple of older projects we had scheduled that we finally terminated those. They've just been on the books forever. So we have some funds available, but instead of just throwing it all on the table in 1 year and losing it all, we want to be a little more strategic maybe on how we approach that. So I put together a couple of numbers for you if you want to jot these down. This is as of about 1:58 this afternoon. So as of today, we have $640,000 roughly in our lodging tax funds. A couple of pieces to add and subtract from this is between now and the end of the year, if we track with our budget, we'll be adding about $202,000 more to that. At the same time, we have outstanding grant commitments. Those are reimbursement basis, so we haven't dispersed all that money yet, but we're anticipating we're going to spend about $180,000 just from the main grant program going out. So if you add those and subtract those, you should see a net number somewhere around about $662,000. And that's what we would see at the end of the year. So then we also have to take a look for a second. Remember that we did a multi-year contract with the Chamber of Commerce, and that was their operations grant. It's $115,000. And in addition, we send $20,000 to the Island County Tourism Board each year, and that's under an existing contract that just runs year to year. So what I did is I backed those off that total just to make sure we don't spend that commitment. And I see us probably having somewhere around $500,000 to $525,000 most likely available at the end of this year. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how much money we're talking about.
Island County was 30.
Is it 30?
I didn't hear what you said. I was.
Oh, it's
asking.
20. It's
20.
20,000.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. That's been a multi-year contract for some time now.
Used to be 80,000.
Mhm.
Every
Okay. So I think this is really just an opportunity. There's not a direct recommendation based on our, like say, our fund balance reserve policies or anything like that, because this isn't an operating fund that has people and has projects they do each year. So I think here it's just an opportunity maybe to talk about what things you would like to see, or maybe just brainstorm a little bit on how we want to approach how much we want to keep in the fund balance, how much we want to put out there into the grant programs. I know every year the LTAC asks that question. You know, they have a lot of good projects and things they want to do, and that they see money on the table. So we really should have a good strategic plan in how we want to do that, so we can answer some of the questions that they can.
Go ahead.
So with the fund balance, let's say if there was a project that wanted to use a significant portion of it, that's something that the lodging tax committee would approve, just like they approve their year-to-year grants. It all runs through the lodging tax
Correct.
committee, correct? Okay. And then can you give us some basic parameters or restrictions on what funds, the lodging tax funds can be used for? Just a general overview for me.
Just in general, they can be used for operations or marketing of tourism support activities. So, you know, we could go down a different list of different things. In 2013, the state changed the rules and added the operations. Before it had to be marketing, so we could only really reimburse for advertising or things that might fit into that umbrella. With that change in the law in 2013, now we can pay for other things as long as they're part of an event that is focused on tourism.
It does have to be an event.
Doesn't have to be an
It can
event.
be
It can be a reader
It could
board,
be part of a park, part of
a park.
Okay.
But you really have to have some feature that you can demonstrate really has a
Brings it,
tourism
okay.
string to it. The process-wise is City Council will decide, okay, we're going to send our grant program, or we're going to send this project to the LTAC. City Council has to take action to refer that, and it goes to the LTAC. When that action's taken, it starts the clock ticking on a 45-day requirement that council can't take action on that referral for at least 45 days. So that LTAC will consider it, they'll make their recommendation, it comes to City Council. You can accept the recommendation, you can reject the recommendation. If there are multiple things on it, you can take one off and leave the rest on. The thing you can't do is change the dollar amounts. Once that's been referred and they've made the recommendation, that's kind of the new caveat now, is we can't change those. And there's different twists and turns if, you know, depending on what happens. We read with the chamber a year or so ago, they kind of got a little snarled up on one of theirs. But I think that's all been worked out now with the state.
One more question. That process, I know we went through the process, earlier this year, but can it be done any time of year? Is there a window? Is it just once a year that we take action as council, or can that be
It can be any time.
anytime?
Yeah.
Okay.
Historically, what we've just done a once a year,
Yeah.
and it's only because we have an annual grant program. We haven't really been using lodging tax on an ad hoc basis, but you can do that at any time.
I think Mr. Servais.
Well, just to follow on, when I was talking to Dr. Merriman, one of the things that I noticed is, it was a conference I attended, that cities, if they build up a reserve like this, they'll actually establish a priority. And one of the talking points that was discussed was even maybe leveraging it for something larger, like, and I think this is applicable, if there was a grant opportunity, and let's say we needed a 25% match or a 50% match, ball field relocation, for example, it's going to take a decent chunk of money. This is something that might be leveraged for a much bigger picture that would serve the community well. So that was one of my thoughts. I just wanted to have the council provide some input rather than, as the LTAC process kicks up here, late summer, early fall, and we pick a number. It's nice to be able to support those all the different organizations that might apply, but might there be a way to leverage these dollars into a much bigger project?
I think Ms. Heisen.
No, he's pretty quick. I love this. First. So relocating the ball fields, excellent example of a long-term plan that has economic development or tourism benefits. The second thing that popped into my head is the lift for the marina. Since that is an enterprise fund, is that something that we would be able to use that on? Because that would bring people here.
It is.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Doug, traditionally, let's just take last year. How much was in the fund? How much was retained? How much was spent out of these dollars? I want to see what this compares to, what our opportunities are for next year.
Really, the numbers I just gave you about this year, they're about exactly the same each year.
We hung on to about $500,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and usually, kind of how we've run this in the past is we spend out usually what we get each year.
Yeah.
So it's just been a net zero for the year as far as change. It may change a little bit, but it's a little immaterial. But we've usually had, $500,000 to $600,000 available at any one time.
My initial take on this is I'd kind of like to keep the same ratio, the same proportions there, because we have a lot of improvements in that city park coming up, and I think we're going to need every dollar, and that is certainly, I think, the city's major tourist attraction. And we're allowed capital expenditures. When I read this, capital expenditures of tourism-related facilities owned and operated by a municipality or public facilities district.
Yeah, you can spend 2% money on a capital item if the capital item is owned by a governmental entity. It used to be nonprofits can do that, but you can't put money into capital items that are owned by a nonprofit. That was one of those changes that's a little bit new, because we used to put money towards the chamber facility years ago, but we wouldn't be able to do that today under the current statutes.
Thank you.
One time, the city has a reserve fund in the lodging tax allocated for a capital project, namely the clock tower. And I understand that money in the reserve has already been expended. I think we should continue to explore putting some money in the reserve for capital projects, like the clock tower. One thing that comes to my mind is the suggestion by Mr. Joel Cervantes about the Portland Loo to be put on downtown Pioneer Way somewhere.
In fact, one of the first test cases for lodging taxes to be used for a capital project was Friday Harbor put restrooms in their area where the tourists came in and everything. And that one got debated for quite a while, but that was actually the first capital investment using lodging taxes by a city. That was many years ago.
I hope that can be used also for that purpose, because Langley did that and used their 1% to put a restaurant. Ms. Heisen?
I'm still mulling over the restroom, tourism heads and beds connection. But hey, if somebody else got to do it, then why not us, right? Just to clarify something that you said earlier about something, it couldn't be owned by a nonprofit. Does it have to be owned by a municipality or a private company, like say the RV park? Could we do something like that to help relocate the RV park? Would we still have to run and manage that, or is that something that, say, someone who wanted to open an RV park could apply for?
What I would see being able to do there is if the city was gonna run it just like we used to,
Right.
we could use lodging taxes for it.
Right.
If we were gonna relocate it and purchase a piece of property, we could potentially, we own the property, but then we have someone manage an RV park. We could probably use some of the lodging taxes to purchase the property, but we couldn't use it to do any of the improvements or things that, you know, whoever the manager was that wanted to come in and do that, if they were gonna own those assets.
That makes sense. So we would own the property and lease it back to them or whatever.
Yeah, there might be like a, purchase lease type thing with a manager like that.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
My brain's just thinking parks for all the, since I can't get past it. But I'm also curious, is it REIT funds? Is that one of those monies also restricted more towards park functions too? Am I right about this? What fund am I
You
thinking?
have it close, it's more the other way around though. You have two different types of REIT money.
Yeah.
There's a first 1/4%, second 1/4%. And in one of them, you can do some park improvements and maybe some acquisition. The second one, I believe, you can't do acquisition or things for parks in it. So that's
Yeah, one of them.
We would have to look at each of those two forms of REIT and see what restrictions there are when it comes to using that for a park.
I thought I remembered just going over with Patricia all of our different funds that one of those REIT was more geared towards the parks and being able to be spent on parks. But I'll be really curious how that fund grows going forward with the growth of our city. And you know, I know it's kind of hard to forecast, but
Yeah.
I hope that will do well and also give us some leverage with park.
And just a note too,
Parks.
when we talk about REIT money, we have to remember in our capital facilities plan, that we come each year, we do different numbers and run that, we do have commitments of REIT money in
For
there.
those.
So when you hear capital facilities plan, always kind of take a look at that and see what things we're doing there, so we're not spending the same money in two different areas there.
Mr. Shabaki.
Thank you. I'm glad that Mayor Pro Tem brought up the Portland News. I continue to get their newsletters, and I've been assured by our Public Works Director and Hank Needham that we will have those some decade now. We budgeted for 2, correct? So we have budgeted for 2 of them. Once again, I would like whatever it is we come up with, whether it's, you know, the ball fields, a possible lift, something, is just trying to leverage the dollars, not just, and certainly not create an ongoing expense with the program, but utilize those. And I don't know if it's possible, Dr. Merriman, to come up before our next workshop with maybe a generic example or 2 out there of other cities that may have done that, whether it's a splash park or something where they were able to secure a grant, but it required a rather large match. I just think if we put our heads together, there's something that we can do with this money and put it to good use. And it might be something in our current park that's necessary, like Mr. Allenberg pointed out, but I just want us to be thinking about that before we get together as a council and have to decide on a dollar amount that we're going to allocate for 2018.
But just theoretical examples, we'd have to see what all the nuances are to it. But say we're working on the park and we look at RCO grants, something like that, maybe they have a 50% match. Maybe there's one that has a 25% match. I could see us, if there's a tourism element to it, that we could use lodging tax money as that match portion as our own funds in that project. So those are just a couple of quick examples that is something that could apply to.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Merriman.
All right.
We move to the next one under Public Works. This is the Crescent Harbor Road, Regatta Drive intersection improvement. Coming out to the table, let's see. I thought Mr. Stoll was. coming in.
That
That's how I'm living.
was intentional.
Bailed on you. Yeah.
Actually, Connie hasn't showed up yet. Connie Powers from Island County, so I was looking for her, but we'll go ahead and proceed.
I'll try and wing it for Connie if that's all right.
Well, that's all right. So basically what we wanted to do is give an update on the Crescent Harbor Regatta intersection project. And then the second part of it is going to be discussing the city's responsibility and options for lowering the water main that's in Regatta. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brad. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Brett Lopane with RH2 Engineering. We're working with the county on designing the improvements to the intersection. So with that, okay, it's up there. So, and this.
That turns the screens off if you look at
That one?
There you go.
Got it.
I've
So-
done that a number of times.
I can't stand up, can I? I didn't know if you could hear me with the mic. Just turn that mic on. Good. Great. Thanks. Hopefully you're familiar with the area. Regatta Drive here, Crescent Harbor Road, Torpedo, NAS Woodby, Seaplane Base right there. Honestly, when I do this type of projects, I like to just give a gut check. Do I think it's a good project? And I do think this is a good project. And hopefully after what I tell you here, you're thinking it's a good project too. This project's a bit unique in a sense that the project here actually spans almost kind of three agencies. We've got city limits here, the project's here, and then we've got also NES Woodby here. So the project's partially on their property, where the city/county have an easement to have the road there. And then we've got the unincorporated Island County. However, I will note that also this is the UGA, so the entire project is within the UGA. So to talk about this project, if I had to describe it in one word, it's a safety project. That's really what this project is about. There were 10 documented collisions in a 3-year study, so that's a fair amount. It's one of the highest accident-prone intersections in Island County. To talk a little bit about the existing conditions, you probably all know this. You see the soft right turn that comes through here, and then Crescent Harbor Road goes down at about a 10% grade through here. So essentially what's happening with a lot of the cars here is the cars are coming northbound, they're taking the soft right, coming through here. The cars aren't slowing down, it's not a sharp turn. And then they're also going down that 10% grade, kind of a steep slope, so they're basically gaining even more speed as they're heading down. They finally enter Crescent Harbor Road right about here and heading down this way. They've turned on the right turn signal like good drivers do. They come through the soft turn and it doesn't cancel because it's a soft right turn. So then you have cars sitting here on Torpedo Road. They see this car coming that just now gets here, so they have this amount of space to make a decision. Do I have enough of a gap to go? They see the right turn signal on and they think, well, these guys are turning right. I'm going to jump across, get in the baseline in front of them, or I'm going to take my left here because they're taking a right. Well, since it didn't cancel, what happens is the cars keep coming and we get basically a T-bone collision there. So that's one of the big problems that we have there. Also talking about southbound. The warrants are there to put in a southbound left turn lane. It's kind of just right over that threshold. The next thing I wanted to show you, so this is where you're standing here, you're at Torpedo Road, you're looking up Crescent Harbor Road, and then that's Regatta Drive. So there's that soft right turn. But as you can see, this 10% grade literally goes right up to the edge of the road. And normally when you build an intersection, you want kind of a landing pad there that's flat for cars to get started. So what's happening is, in inclement weather, when it's icy out, cars can't get started. You're on a 10% grade. So the county literally has to shut the intersection down. And even when it's wet out, the cars have a hard time starting. Tires spin a little bit just because it's kind of that steep grade. I don't want to shortchange you guys, so I'm making sure I remembered everything. So let's talk about what we're proposing to do with this intersection. So this is another view looking at basically the proposed improvements. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to take that soft right turn lane, pull it up to the intersection, and make it a traditional right turn lane. That's going to slow cars down because I have the sharper turn to make. With that, cars will enter Crescent Harbor Road here. So instead of, remember that distance that cars had to make a decision here? Now they've got the cars this far away. So they're able to make a better decision on a gap for getting across the intersection or making their left turns. Something else that's a little less obvious from this view to see, but we're lowering the grade of the intersection about 8 to 9 feet here. And you can see this retaining wall that we're proposing there because we didn't want to go too far and impact these homes and take more property than needed. You'll also see the southbound dedicated left turn lane coming through here. So with lowering the road here, the other thing that we gain is you don't have that steep 10% grade right away for cars to keep accelerating right as soon as they get onto Crescent Harbor Road. And now we're creating that landing pad with the intersection so the cars will be on a nice flatter 2% slope, and when they stop in icy conditions, they can get going again. A couple other things. You'll see that we're adding 4-foot shoulders here, so that's going to improve safety for cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And we're also adding some LED lighting through here. The design's changed a little bit, so some of the light positions are different than what we're showing there. And then with every good road project, you've got your necessary stormwater facilities. So that's going to provide a good benefit to the project area for providing water quality treatment to the stormwater and also some of the detention so that we're not creating flooding or negative impacts downstream. So if you give the engineer a conch, he will inevitably show you a plan and profile view. That's just what we do. This was just showing you basically kind of the grade change that we're having here. I didn't want to bore you with too many of these, but this is the wall design plans kind of showing that at least for where the wall's at, we're talking it's probably about 10 to 11 feet tall, just because it's more upgrade than the center of the intersection. And then that's just another view of the wall plan. So when we go and do these projects, we create this nice utility plan and say, okay, we've got this conflict, and it's at this station location. We got to this project, and it's like, well, it's all of them, because we're lowering the intersection so much. So coming full circle, how does that affect the city? Well, the city has a water main right here going through the project area that's impacted by lowering the grade of this intersection by that 8 or 9 feet. So with that, it's going to come full circle to these guys when they talk too, but we had we put forth a scope of work and estimate to redesign that water main. That was something the city staff asked us for, and some kind of key aspects to that water main design that I think is a little out of the norm. We're looking at doing a construction bypass. So right now, this main comes over here and provides water supply to the base. So since we're lowering this intersection so much, we can't just put in a new water main and dig it 14 feet deep and put it in. That doesn't make sense. We've actually got to go in, lower the grade of everything, and then basically get the water main in place. So what we're talking about doing is figuring out some sort of bypass water main to maintain that supply to the base during construction. We've got to give the contractor some direction to be able to do that. The second thing is that with the utility relocations, the gas company has an 8-inch high-pressure gas main. They get very excited about their high-pressure gas mains. It's very precious to them, obviously, because high-pressure mains, if they start to leak, we've seen those where they're blowing out of the ground. So the other thing that gas companies sometimes do is they'll induce a current on their pipe to protect it cathodically so it doesn't corrode, it doesn't rust. So if we go and put a nice ductile iron metal water main in there and they induce that current, it's going to attack the next thing that it can that's metal, and that's going to be the ductile iron water main. So we just need to spend a little time coordinating with the gas company, figure out what their plans are so that we can design what we need to design and make sure that we don't end up in that situation. With the design, we'll also obviously be looking at the vertical design, preparing a profile of that, making sure we don't design any conflicts with utilities. We also, RH2 prepares testing and final water main configurations so that the city knows exactly what they're going to be getting. And also that's helpful when it comes to the as-built stage, so if somebody looks at it later on, they know right there what's in the ground. How is this water main connected when it was put in? We'll also be preparing specifications, cost estimates to go along with these. We go through a city review process, and RH2 has a long QA/QC process to make sure that what we're getting you is a good product. So we're having another engineer take a look at that. And if you've ever seen our plans, there's always 2 PE stamps on all of our plans because we're making sure that we get that QA/QC process and you see it, you see who that is. Once we go through that review process, we'll go ahead and work to finalize those, making revisions that are needed, get them to the bid document stage so that we can get them out. This project does have federal funding in it, so it adds a little layer of paperwork, I guess I want to say, complexity. And then also included in that scope and estimate, we had gone basically cradle to grave. We were going to go from the beginning all the way through the end of construction. So we've got some services in there for services during bidding and services during construction. So with that, that's what I had.
Very good. Do you have questions about the project itself that you'd like to ask before we move into talking about the scope of services? Because we're gonna talk a little bit more about the scope of services before we. Okay.
This may be completely irrelevant to this particular conversation. I might be getting ahead of myself, but can we do something besides a retention pond? Is that an option in terms of runoff?
It's feasible to do it like an underground vault, so it's buried. But we do have to do something there, and that's the only way to get them like out of sight is to really put them in a vault underground. That adds cost because now you, instead of something being open, now you've got to go dig it out and put concrete structures in there.
That
But
makes sense.
the answer is yes, it just costs more money.
Gotcha. You know, I realize you have to do something. I'm
Yeah.
just
I mean,
philosophically opposed to the aesthetics of a retention pond.
If you wanted to pin me down, I mean, I'd throw at you like $50,000 to $60,000 cost increase on the project. So, and if it helps, the estimated construction cost is $1.1 million at this point. Is where we're at. So,
Cool. Thanks.
yeah.
Anyone? Mr. Campbell?
I drive this intersection a lot. Is it safe to say, this is for my brain, that what we're doing is from Regatta to the Navy base, we're basically making the straight road part twice as long as it was, roughly?
So you're talking about here?
Yeah, because
Oh.
if you use the other picture that
Right.
that
yeah. Right.
comes way down there, and that creates havoc there at the corner where the Navy base is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's ballpark. It might be not twice as long, but it's adding
Yeah.
a significant amount. You know, in terms of if you're sitting here trying to gauge a gap in the traffic, can I make this? I'd much rather be gauging somebody that comes
Yeah.
from here that just made a hard right turn that starts out slow versus somebody that's probably doing 35 to maybe 40 to get started here. So
I've seen those.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Did
Okay.
that answer your question?
Yeah,
then?
thank you.
Hi, Tony. Hopefully, I didn't steal your thunder.
No,
Okay.
you're doing good, I think.
I talked about the project. I don't know if
Nice.
you want to add anything funding wise or.
Probably good.
See part of your team. You introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm Connie Bowers. I'm the Assistant County Engineer with Island County.
Thank you. Welcome. Mr. Sabratis has a question.
Thank you. I'm glad Connie's here now. So Island County's got the lead on this.
Yes.
Yes. Which means Island County's paying for most of this.
So the background on the project is that we had Island every year we do our 6-year evaluation of what projects we're looking for in the next 6 years, and one of those things we do is we look at all our intersection collisions, and this one rose up in our evaluation as our number 2 collisions. It doesn't really compare with what urban cities, even Oak Harbor, larger ones have more density, but Oak Harbor has much more density than the county does. But it rises up to number 2 in our level of concern. And so that drove it to something we wanted to have further evaluation on. And then in addition, every year we tend to close this intersection during snowy and icy weather. You probably mentioned this because of the weather conditions. So those 2 things had us go to a consultant to evaluate this intersection as well as a few others. And when a funding opportunity came available, a grant opportunity that matched with this profile, as well as looking for something that had an urban classification, it was a good match. So we went with funding. It has Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, which is a federal funding opportunity, and it has, I think, a 13% match. So Island County pays for that match piece of it, and the federal government covers the rest.
Pretty good, nice. And I agree with Councilmember Heisen, the retention ponds are always, I understand they're necessary. My thought would be, since it'll be on our side there, is that retaining wall, the 10-ish feet, that's big.
Mm-hmm.
Any way to make it more aesthetically pleasing, not 2 5-foot terraces or something? Is it, in one of the pictures, I think it was in here or somewhere.
Yeah.
Just a giant cement wall, like by Walmart?
Yeah, that was one of the questions the city had, and I'm a bit at the mercy of the county and what they want to do, because obviously I'll describe it as basically a concrete wall. I mean, you can do anything with it. You could stamp it, you could write your name on it as this drawing, whatever you want to do to make it more aesthetically pleasing than what I'll call the popcorn finish there on maybe the one that you saw in your handout. But you can we've done some where it looks like a textured rock, and we've added pigment to it, so it's colored. It was a reddish rock that we did, and more kind of natural looking, I guess. So yes, those are options.
And that is something that in the permitting process with the city, they asked us to present some choices to look at. So that's something that's still in our pocket to do.
Thank you. Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. When you scoped this together with the city, is that correct? After you decided to do this project, you got together with the city?
We've met with the city a number of times, sure, even at the beginning, yes.
Yeah, you guys, was there any merit in a roundabout there that would reduce the paper, possibly solve the same problem? You still have a potential T-bone situation.
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Take your swing.
Yeah, the county actually had 2 studies. One of them looked at about 7 different options, and I think 2 of those included roundabouts. And just with the lay of Torpedo Road and Crescent Harbor and Regatta, they just couldn't find a feasible way to make it work. And one of the big problems was just having to acquire so much right-of-way to put a roundabout in there. In my engineering opinion, I think this is an excellent, economical solution. I think it's really going to solve a lot of the concern for some of the traffic collisions that are happening. It's interesting because a lot of the traffic collisions are happening at Torpedo Road, but the fix needs to be at Regatta Drive. So yeah.
I would add in the challenge with right-of-way at this location is that Navy-based property right there. So while the local representatives are very interested and helpful in moving this forward, they really don't have much to do with right-of-way, and that would be a big showstopper for us.
Okay. What's the county's cost for this portion of work? County only, not the city's water. Do you know what that is?
We have applied $1.2 million for the grant. I don't know what the current engineering estimate is for the
1.1.
construction. It's 1.1 for the
Yeah,
construction
I have
only.
1.1, and then you have a 13%.
And then there's
match.
all the design that we've done as well, and the right-of-way acquisition.
So the county's portion, the 1.1 includes the city water portion too, correct?
That's not in that estimate.
Okay. So what's the city's, what's your preliminary estimate on the 12-inch water main?
If I had to knee jerk, 80
you don't have
80
to-
to 100,000.
Oh,
I do it all the time.
Is this
I'll throw a number at you all the time. I won't leave you hanging.
Yeah, you know what?
be best friend.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming. That's why I looked footed and said, all right.
That's interesting.
What about the bypass that goes along with it? Is that on top of that?
The bypass would be in addition, but I haven't designed it yet. My intent would be to figure out some way to make the bypass be permanent.
Okay.
especially if we had to put in HDPE to protect the pipe from any currents on the gas main. The HDPE, you just excavate it down, then you pick it up and put it in your water main trench and you're done, because that stuff's just flexible. That's my mind thinking. I haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I have to do a design and figure it out, but that's what I was thinking.
So you've got all of the grading, all the profiles, all this kind of stuff. That's all in your package, the county's package, and they're paying 13% of 1.1 million. I got that. So, and one of the possibilities about the relocation of the existing water main is to use HEPE, keep it live, keep it off someplace where you
Right.
trench it before you complete all your excavation in there.
Right. So my thinking there, and I haven't thought this
And
through
you
yet,
can-
so don't.
And then you, I know, then you can shut it down.
Right. So we'd go ahead and we'd get an HDPE pipe laid out.
Yep.
From point A to point B.
Yep.
Contractor's means
Yep.
and methods for exactly how he or she is going to do that. Make the connection so that main is live, the old main is still live, and then we disconnect the old main, go ahead and excavate everything out, get it to
Right.
that right grade,
Yep. Yep.
then we dig our water main trench, pick up the HDPE and just drop it in while it's still live.
I understand that.
Okay.
So what's the engineering cost for the county side of this thing?
For the county side,
Yeah.
I want to say that we were pushing 3-ish with acquisition. We were pushing around 300,000, I
I'm
think.
talking about design. I'm trying to compare apples to apples.
Yes, that is correct. So 300,000, and that included a full gamut survey, right-of-way acquisition, sub-consultants in there, and
And the right-of-way acquisition was in there too,
yeah.
but that's part of that grant. So again, it's that match is what the county
Well,
itself is.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to get into the
Right.
weeds with that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I know we have a franchise agreement. It says we have to do this with the county. We're not enemies. We still live on Whidbey Island together, okay? What I'm looking at is, the first take that I had on this was that for a 12-inch main, not including your temporary bypass, would be around $60,000 to $80,000.
Okay, construction
Oh,
costs.
yes, construction cost only.
Sure.
75 a foot to 80 a foot, and I took it up even higher than that. At 60, that's 67, that's just construction cost now, not support service, anything else. That's 60% of the design is 67% of construction cost at 60K, which is probably on the tight side. 80K is 50. 125 is 32. I'm looking at these numbers that the engineering, the A&E costs, we don't have A in here, they are substantial for the small project that this is. When I look at the breakdown on the budget, the design side, only the design side for this water main is 10 grand, but somehow we've got 40 grand in here.
I thought for services during bidding, services during construction, I thought those two added to
I'm looking.
16-ish.
I'm looking right here. Prepare construction design drawings. This is for your labor and material, 10,411.
Okay.
And now we're piling on all these other things. I don't know how you get up to services during construction for almost more than the cost of design when you got a water main going in, when our people are doing the inspections.
Sure.
They're just out of scope for me. That's day
Yeah.
one. It's not the project. It's not even the cost of the project. You're my target. It's the percentage of design to the cost of the project that
Sure.
makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and in my experience, especially when you're doing these small projects, you lose that economy of scale. I think you're talking
But
about
we're not doing a small project. You are packaging this with a big one.
I
So
have-
how
I
did
have
you-
a whole
how did
different
you come
client
up-
to work
How did you come
with,
up
though.
with, for example, on your construction services, 11,000 Street 362, you had to put some hours against some of this stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I gave you the breakdown of that, right? Did you happen to give it to him?
No, I have not.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm happy to share my detail with you. I want to be open and honest. I don't want to hide anything. You know, we prepared our scope of work to itemize what it is that we'd be doing, and we put together the hours to that. And-
I'm still not with our staff on this one yet, but I'm only 1 out of 7 votes on this thing.
Okay.
But I have some other questions in here. Apparently, you answered this question. The city did have some input on the design when you had a project going. You guys teamed up, okay? Did the city have any input on the selection of the engineering firm?
The city
That's
did
a
not.
yes or no?
No,
Tell me why.
don't know. There's no good answer to that. We just went with our county selection team. So we could have done that, we did not.
All right. What's the estimate for the preliminary estimate for the water side of this?
that's the one
We
I
don't
need.
have that.
I haven't done it, but that's when I knee jerked it about 80,000, just ballpark.
So to go back to the engineering selection, can you expand on the selection process that you went through to select the RH2? Yeah.
So the selection process, it pretty strict to follow those Fed Aid guidelines. So we have to
we
do
know
the
what
request
the
for
general
qualifications, and then we do interviews
routine is.
and select the best qualified person that way. So we have a team that does those interviews.
So
is there like 2 or 3 people on the team, or 5?
It's not a set number of people. It varies on not necessarily who we're interviewing, but it just varies on which project it is. I don't remember who it was on this. I'd have to go back and look that up. But it's
I
not.
do.
It's normal. Oh, there you go. He remembers. It was that.
It was
part.
you, Joe, and Spencer.
So it's 3 people. It was the project engineer, our construction engineer who oversees our engineering design projects, and myself.
will the city have any say in the selection of the low bidder?
Doubtful. It's usually going to go to the low bidder if they're qualified.
So we're really riding the city's horse on this thing.
Generally, you're
Not
going
much say
along.
in
Yeah,
it.
we've been involved very much in the design process with the consulting engineer coming to the meetings. One of the big ads was a left turn lane on Regatta. That wasn't in our original scope, but it's something the city really asked for, and we came through with that.
So
we've been involved, but not in the selection piece.
okay. So in the bidding process, you get bids. Let's say you get 6 bids out of this thing, and we have nothing to say about the final bid. And let's say the county portion of it has a low bid of, I'm just going to say $1 million,
Sure.
and the water side of it is $200,000. And then the next person that bid this thing has a much higher county number,
Right.
but a
Lower
much
water.
lower water number, and we have nothing to say about that, but we have to pay the bill. How do we work that out so it's fair to the city?
Right. I don't have a straight answer for you there. I'd have to look into it more and see how we can do that.
When will we get a great answer?
When you get bids.
Yeah, it's just something we haven't done very often, so I honestly just don't know.
I'm not just keen to sit and accept, hey, you know what, we have nothing to say about this, because this is expensive. This, 30% design for your work is even expensive. 37% design for our work is really expensive. I would think you guys would be concerned about it, or I am anyway. So at this point, we're going to wait until we have some discussion with staff. But the county says you don't have any choice because you have a franchise agreement. But I don't have to support that. I can vote no anyway. And the rest of the council can do whatever they want. Because I don't think it's equitable.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I guess that's going to shake out in the bids. I mean, I certainly hope that it doesn't end up in a situation where one bidder's 80,000 and the next one's 250.
It's probably not going to be a spread like that.
Yeah.
But
I hear what you're saying, and I don't have.
the
If I
city
had a
should
great
have
answer, I'd
something
put
to
it
say
forward.
about it, because we're paying for part of the engineering too, and a higher percentage than this county is paying.
I'd like to thank Mr. Albert for
Thank you.
his expertise in those questions, expertise in that line of business and construction business, And I'm sure that you're very much concerned about what this will cost the city. And that's most your concern. Will it be prudent if you discuss it with the city engineer if you have more questions and with consultation with the RH2 in Island County?
I'm finished with my questions right
Oh,
now.
okay.
I can deal with Joe. Work with Joe, not deal with Joe.
Yeah,
I have to
Joe.
work for this guy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Albrecht. Any further questions from the council?
So we got, Arnie and I
Go
have
ahead.
a little bit more to discuss on this one as far as what our alternatives are. You know, expanding on what Mr. Allenberg was concerns are, what are our options?
So, our options, you know, we consider what the options are for, you know, getting a new water line in that's compatible with the intersection reconstruction. As far as, you know, the installation of the line itself, you can either it's possible to do it in advance of the intersection project or coordinate it with the county's intersection project, or eliminate the water main on Regatta Drive and make other changes to our water system to provide that same capacity that the Regatta Drive main provides, or relocate the main following intersection construction. You know, I mean, it's possible to do those things. But there's, you know, all four options are quite different and offer different benefits and drawbacks. And that, you know, relocating in advance of construction, Brett touched on it, that water line's gotta be a lot lower. It's going to be a much bigger, more expensive project to do that. If we coordinate the construction with the county's project, we can build in project coordination that's valuable. You know, we have one contractor that's responsible for coordinating all of these construction activities with the other utilities that are present, such as storm drain, the gas main, power. All those things, you know, are kind of fall under one purview, and there's one entity responsible for getting them in. So we don't wind up with conflicting interests in that. And then if we, you know, I considered eliminating the Regatta Drive water main and what it would take to provide that same capacity to our distribution system, and that's a much bigger project. More water main involved, a lot more engineering involved, probably a revision to our water system plan that we have to submit to the Department of Health. So that's really not an option for us. And then relocating the main following intersection construction is problematic as well, because while it eliminates the deep trenching, now you're cutting a brand new street that just got put in, and that would require, I would imagine, grinding and overlaying, you know, the Regatta Drive portion of the project, which is not very good use of resources. So, you know, the benefits of coordinating with the county on this are great compared to the other alternatives. And then as far as just selecting a design consultant or a method of designing the water main, you know, we can contract with our own consultant to do this, and we still would wind up carefully coordinating with RH2, and could even wind up hiring them also, because of the intricacy of making our water main design match the project. I've done this before on water main relocation projects that involve WashDOT. And it's a real big iterative process to make that work, to integrate the work of 2 design teams. And then if we, so I did go and review the county's consultant selection process. They do a very similar process to what we do, you know, and RH2 was their choice as the most qualified consultant. They are on the MRSC roster, which we draw from when we solicit consultants, and also municipal water main design work is a normal and significant part of their practice. So with their intimate familiarity with the project and their experience, they're clearly the most qualified consultant for us on this project as well as the county.
You're gonna tell that to the engineering company that does our next water project?
I doubt they would disagree, really.
Yeah, that RH2 is more qualified than they are.
For this particular project, yeah.
Well, what if it's RH2 for the next project?
Yeah.
Can I add something too? And I don't know if you know this. What we put forth is not a lump sum bid. It's a not to exceed amount, and then we bill against it. So if things do go better than anticipated, we don't bill you for that remaining amount.
And that was a question that I had a conversation yesterday with Joe about.
Okay.
That I recognize it's T&M not to exceed. The flags that go up for me in this situation is there's so much commingled services on the site. How do you possibly keep all of these parts separated when you got support services and bid and stuff like that? I mean, at some point you're making these value judgments in there to fill the holes on your side of the equation. You're not turning in time cards that say, well, we worked for 3 hours today for you on this, but
Yes,
we were out
actually we
there anyway.
do. We do actually give you that. You've seen our WITs by the day, by the hours, with a paragraph description of exactly what each person worked on. You'll get that detail. Absolutely. That's the way that we do business. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna throw this in, Joe, whether you want me to or not. I worked with Arnie on the private side and the public side, and I have the utmost respect for Arnie and his work ethic and stuff like that. And I hope you have the same respect for me, likewise. But we have to ask these questions. When things seem, we don't get into the weeds, we don't get the details. We look at trends, we look at a lot of graphs, we look at percentages, we look at what seems about right. And what jumped out on me was the percentage of design to cost. I don't have to say any more than that. I'm looking for alternatives. One of them it's a loop system. It's my understanding it's a loop system that's in there.
It's part of a larger loop.
It's part of a larger loop, but if we shut that system down temporarily for doing the excavation, all the heavy civil work in there to get this underground, do we have the fire flow in the loop system to meet the bounds beyond the shutdown section? That's one question I would want to know.
We're looking into that in the next week or two. With the fire department's going to help us do some flow testing. We're going to shut down the Regatta water main and flow a couple of fire hydrants.
Because that could possibly
Yes.
avoid dealing with HDP and all the other
It could.
things that you go in there.
Yep.
So, okay.
Going back to the first meeting, I'm also saying, I'll try to use Ms. Messinger, you got that?
This is just a general big question that may be a real obvious answer. So the county side was funded mostly through this federal grant. Were we as the city for our portion for our water main not able to be a part of that, or how does that federal grant work? And in the future, is the city able for our part to join in that too, or how does that work?
The STBG grant does focus on the transportation projects as a rule. I don't know how they deal with utility relocation. That's
Well,
usually,
even if
you know,
it's
as a
part of it, because
franchise.
I mean, it has
Right.
to be done because we're,
Right.
what I'm hearing, so it couldn't be included as the overall transportation picture.
It's a separate deal. It's that use of the franchise puts that cost on the franchise user.
Okay.
The franchise use at no cost. If a project comes in and there needs to be relocation, that puts it back on the user, so it's separate.
Okay.
We also have gas lines in this area and
Power.
ESE,
And
And-
cable communications, yeah.
which are
So
all,
they're
all
all-
going
All
through
on
you.
their
Yeah.
own, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
another different example might be the Sharps Corner Roundabout
Mhm.
project that's coming up.
The water.
Our water lines go through there. It's a state highway, and we're going to be responsible for relocating our water lines if need be. I think we're working to a point where we may not have to do that, but in other projects we have.
There's another question, and again, this is just general funding. So you said that this water piece flows solely onto the base, or where does that water end up going?
No, it goes to the city system.
The whole city?
Yeah. Yeah, it provides, a link along the east side of town, and it makes our system much more robust.
It runs the length of Regatta, doesn't it?
It does. It runs all the way down to Pioneer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Go back to Mr. Stoll. Do you have any more?
No, I think that they presented it quite well, and the options are out there.
And that concludes that portion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll be looking at your bills. Your
I'm going to email them straight to you.
And now, moving along, this will be the development services portion, starting with the park plan update. And coming up to the table, development services, Mr. Steve Power, Mr. Kamek.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Segal. Kat will guide you through this conversation.
Thank you. Senior Planner Kat Kamek. Just wanted to give the council a heads up on our park plan update. If the council remembers, at the last meeting, or the first meeting in April, I should say, we had the docket for the 2017 Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and that included the park plan update. Our last park plan was adopted in 2009, and for all purposes, that plan is valid for the city because it's a long-term plan. It has projects in there that are 20, 30, 40 years. The strategies in there are for longer. It's kind of called a 6-year plan because the state requires us to update it every 6 years in order for it to be valid for their grant money sources. But it's still a valid document for us. Whether it's a valid document for the state or not for grant purposes is one thing that our updated plan will qualify us for, but that's not necessarily mean that our plan is expired for any reason. So we adopted it in 2009, and here we are getting it updated so that we can be eligible for grants and have a chance for us to update it and get citizen input to see what changes we have to consider and so on. So we've started the discussion, gave a presentation to the Planning Commission last night and got them kind of started in thinking about the park plan update, and I will probably present that in this similar information to the park board at the next meeting and get them involved in the process as well. So what are we kind of doing to update the plan? We're going to work with the Planning Commission and the Park Board. They will be the primary bodies that consider this. The Park Board will be probably involved in a lot of the details of the plan. The Planning Commission has the authority to hold public hearing for a document. It's part of the comprehensive plan. It's an element of the comprehensive plan. So they have a role in it, and they'll be holding the public hearings for it. And then, of course, the City Council has the ultimate authority to adopt those recommendations. So we'll be working with those two boards. What we have in the plan right now, what I'm working with the Commission, Planning Commission, and the Park Board is basically giving them an idea of what's in the current plan. Since it's adopted 6 years ago, we have a lot of new members. It's good to just get them updated with what's in the current plan. And then that way it helps us focus on areas of amendment and changes and so on. Not anticipating too many changes. If you look at page 6 of the plan, I don't know if you have it or not, probably in, yes, you do, okay. So on page 6 of the plan is just the table of content, and that gives a kind of a good idea on how the plan is structured. We structure the plan in 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 has kind of the vision and the goal and the goals and policies and the recommended plan. It's kind of like an executive summary, so to speak. If you just took tier 1, it could stand by itself to kind of establish what the park plan is all about. Tier 2 is kind of the nuts and bolts of the plan. It has the inventory, it does the level of service and level of attention, existing conditions, kind of identify some of the needs that are necessary in our parks and so on. And then tier 3 is administrative policies. Those are the things that our parks division would deal with, or we would deal with in terms of standards when we look at things, minimum park area requirements in new subdivisions where public parks are dedicated, or trail widths or things like that. So those are just kind of the manual of practice, so to speak. What I'm hoping to do with this update, as I mentioned, I haven't in the last 6 or 7 years since the plan has been adopted seen any major shifts in how we think about parks. So I don't think we'll have any major changes in our guiding principles or our goals and policies. However, they're worth a review and a read to see if we can add and benefit from any additions or changes. And of course, we'll update all the numbers in tier 2, update the inventory, update population, see if our level of service is still working, and look at the existing conditions and update inventory of the needs that we have for the parks, and that'll happen in tier 2. We did a survey last time we did it, and one of the recommendations in this plan is to try and do the same survey every 6 years so that you can compare data with the changing population. And I think it's a good idea to do that. The survey is similar, at least, or collect the same information. So we're hoping to do that as well over the summer and and get public input that way with the survey. Last time we did it, we got like 650 odd responses. The responses are compiled in the back of the plan. It has some very interesting comments if you have would like to read and be entertained. There are some funny ones in there. But people are interested in their parks, and they definitely want to have their 2 cents in, so we'll give them an opportunity to do that. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do over the next few months. So I thought I'll present this information, and if there are any questions, concerns, or things that the City Council has, we can definitely take that into account as we go through the process. So just opening it up for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Questions from the council? Yeah, Ms. Passinger.
This may be a real obvious one, but our Windjammer Park plan, you talked about using this in order to be eligible for grants and to get grants, and I know that we've talked about going after grants for our improvements going forward to the park. So is that going to be the portion or the entire Windjammer Park plan that we've gone through the process included in this park plan as well for grants and such?
Great question. I know the city, the council spent a lot of time, and the community spent a lot of time on the Windjammer Park plan. And and that plan is a standalone plan. It's like a sub-area plan under the parks plan, So since there's a lot of planning efforts that went into it, I would consider that we'll make references in this current document and link this and that document. But I would expect that document to function by itself and have its own recommendation. It's a subset of the park plan, but it stands by itself. It's eligible for grants as it stands right now. So,
And if I could tag on to that, Senior Planner Dennis Lefevre helped us get that plan, the Windjammer Park Integration Plan, certified by RCO, which is the main grant agency that we look to for parks grants. So we are already eligible for RCO grants in Windjammer Park based upon the integration plan that the council has previously approved. When CAC talks about maintaining our eligibility for grants, that's in all of our other parks throughout the community is what we need to do in this document in terms of updating it so that we can get grants for Fort Nugent or one of our neighborhood parks. Yeah.
You mentioned something about updating every 6 years. Would this be similar to TIP, where it's updated every 6 years? There's a listing of projects
Yes,
for
we
funding purposes. Would that be the same?
absolutely. We do have in this document a 6-year plan, and it has identified projects to tackle over the 6 years. We've accomplished some of the projects, some of it just funding and opportunity did not present itself. So with this planning process, we'll have a chance to look at the next 6 years and what potential projects do we want to accomplish.
Thank you. If no further questions, we'll move along. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Powers. Next one is,
I'm not going anywhere.
you got the next one, critical areas ordinance. And coming to the table, Mr. Lefebvre.
Yes, thank you.
Take it away, Dennis.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. My name is Dennis Lefevre, Senior Planner. I'd like to do a presentation on the Critical Areas Ordinance, which we've been working on for the last several months. As you recall, as maybe a little bit of a background, what I'd like to do is refresh your memories as to where we were last year about this time, looking at the comp plan update process, getting that ready to be adopted by June of 2016, which we accomplished. As a part of that, the state required that we look at our development regulations, in particular critical areas, and also update those at the same time. Well, due to the effort and the manpower required to update the comp plan, the state was offering basically a 1-year extension for any community that needed that to update their critical areas ordinance, and the council approved that resolution to do that. So we've been initiating that effort within the last 6 months or so. And what I'd like to do is just address what was actually done at the last major update, which was back in 2005. My task was to look at what was different between 2005 and 2017, what has changed as far as the federal regulations, the state regulations are concerned for critical areas, and how they applied to our ordinance that was done in 2005. I'm happy to say that the effort back in 2005 was pretty complete. It was very well done. It addressed a lot of issues that were brought forth back then, including best available science, creating a reasonable use exception in our critical areas. It also established a reporting format for developers and a study requirement for each of our critical areas, which was not mandated, but it was a strong requirement back then at the state level. It also utilized the model ordinance, which the state had prepared for communities to do their update at that time. So we were in pretty good shape starting off with this update. What I'd like to do today is kind of take a 4-section approach to my presentation, and 3 of those are going to be fairly short. The second one is kind of a more of a mid-level view on each of our critical area chapters, and kind of some of the changes that I expect will be on your plate to look at for proposed revisions to each of those chapters. Section 3, I'd like to look at a consistency, which is held in pretty high regard by the state, that we need to make sure that our comprehensive plan goals and policies are implemented through our development regulations, in particular the critical areas, and also the consistency with our shoreline master program, which is actually quite important when you talk about critical areas and the overlapping of the jurisdiction between the comp plan and the Shoreline Master Program. And then I'd like to discuss next steps and kind of set the table for what we anticipate coming before you in the next couple of months. So with that, the first section, I'd like to just address 2 chapters in Title 20, and that's the definitions and general regulations. The definitions, I don't anticipate seeing a lot of proposed additions to. If you recall, with our low impact development proposal that we took forth late last year, we actually added a lot of resource-oriented definitions as part of that effort. So we don't have to do a lot of tweaking to the definitions. However, the Department of Fish and Wildlife did change their definitions for fish and wildlife habitat conservation and fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. So we've adopted their language, which wasn't a whole lot different than what we had existing in code, but I thought it'd be just as wise to use what the state is providing for us. Another section that we are looking at is the general regulations. It's in chapter 20.12, and that's kind of the overriding regulations that we have for all critical areas. It deals with such things as reasonable use, critical area reports, those types of things that are mandated for all 5 sections of our critical areas. A couple of changes that we are looking at making to that chapter are actually recommendations from the Department of Ecology, and that is to deal with some, again, minor word changes to the mitigation sequencing that we've identified and fencing that we actually have established in our code. So again, the details will be coming forth to you as we move forward with this process. Frequently flooded areas is in Title 17.20. You might recall a couple of months ago we actually discussed frequently flooded areas. Council moved to adopt a new flood insurance rate map as part of Ordinance 17.94. That was a good move because that really helped us out as far as meeting our requirements for the critical area section of the frequently flooded areas. One of the key areas that was addressed in that ordinance was meeting the biological opinion, which was established in 2008, and that basically dealt with National Marine Fisheries Service's issue of not dealing with the Endangered Species Act and development in the floodplain. Through that ordinance that we approved, we are in conformance now with some of the alternatives that were identified in that biological opinion. And basically how we're dealing with that is that on each development that comes through that's within the floodplain, we are requiring a biological assessment be done on those developments. That's consistent with the opinion and also one of the alternatives that was identified in that opinion. What I am doing is proposing a new section 20.34. It's going to be a brief section, but most of our critical areas are in Title 20 except for frequently flooded areas. So what I thought I'd do is just as an idea, is throw one in there that basically establishes a description and a purpose for the frequently flooded areas as far as critical areas, but then refers back to Title 17.2 for the regulations. It's just kind of like you have all the critical areas in one title, but then you can refer back for the specifics for the frequently flooded areas. Yes?
Just about that, what do you mean by a biological study that has to be done now? What does that consist of, and who's going to pay for it?
Well, that would be borne on the developer. They would be required to do a biological assessment and well, it's an assessment that makes sure that if there's any habitat that is being disturbed or impacted by that proposed development, that there's some type of mitigation or some proposal that essentially there's no net loss of that habitat due to that development. They have to prove that through that assessment. There might not be any impact whatsoever.
And this is only in the new flooded area that has to be done?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
and who is licensed to do this biological study? I mean, Is it a state agency, or, I mean, who do you go to?
You go to private consultants. So generally someone who is going to be knowledgeable in the wetland sciences will be able to handle that. There are biological assessment consultants out there. I mean, they're pretty lengthy lists of that. Just a quick clarification. The requirement applies in all of the frequently flooded areas, not just the new areas that were added when FEMA updated their maps.
Okay.
Yeah, so it applies to any of the locations which are subject to the floodplain regulation and the
So like the Dillard area, for my,
yes.
Dillard area, if
Yes.
someone's gonna build anything down there, they have to do a biological study.
Unless it is one of those things which we were able to put the exceptions to the code in. So you might recall when Brian Lee, your building official, presented that item to you, he talked a little bit about the exceptions that FEMA does allow, and we took full advantage of those and put all of those exceptions into the code.
Okay.
So there are some things which, this will sound bad, that even FEMA will acknowledge is such a low threshold that we don't have to have that study. Anything beyond that, we have an obligation under FEMA and under the flood insurance program to make sure that you, as the person who's proposing to build that thing, conducts that study to see if that thing that you're going to build is going to damage habitat for one of the endangered species.
Okay, so, and it's on a checklist that we give them saying,
that's the nuts
hey,
and bolts
these,
of it. Yeah.
this is what you're gonna do, here's the permit, and these are things you gotta check off, and if they're required or not. Okay, I just kind of want to get my head around,
it's not
I
a
don't
new
remember
thing.
hearing that.
It's not a new thing for us. We've been implementing it since the court case was first lost by FEMA. But what has really happened from our perspective is that there just has not been any real private construction that would require us to trigger that particular thing. Now, for our own work, like the wastewater treatment facility, we've done a biological assessment because we already had to because of the federal funding. Right? So that study actually checks off two boxes. One, it satisfies the funding box. The other one is it satisfies the FEMA box. The other, just as a final thought, is that a large portion of the floodplain area is our property. So this rule really affects us more than anybody else.
I remember that from that, but I mean, when you were talking about new construction, like, ding, lights went off, and it's like, okay, what else are we asking developers to do? I just kind of wanted to. Thank you.
This is a tough one for us, but it's something that we have to do.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next chapter that I'd like to address briefly again is our wetlands chapter. Back in 2005, we did use the 2004 Department of Ecology guidance, which was very helpful at that time. However, in the last 12 years, there's been a lot of changes to wetlands as far as the state is concerned, primarily due to the linkages between wildlife habitat and the values and functions that the wetlands provide that wildlife habitat. So the state has, as I noted, a better understanding of functions, better ways to evaluate them, and what is needed to protect them. And they have instituted basically that into a new wetland type regulations for the state, which we will utilize in our update, but it will impact what we have existing in code to some degree as far as the new wetland rating system that they have come up with. It might impact to some degree our buffers that we have around our wetlands, how we deal with the functions and maintain the wildlife habitat for the wetlands in our city. So there's going to be some substantial change to that chapter. I'd like to make note that that wetland is not in the city of Oak Harbor, by the way. Another chapter that is being impacted somewhat substantially is our fish and wildlife habitat conservation area. And as I just mentioned, there's that linkage between wetlands and habitat that the state is looking at very closely. We again are using the priority habitat species, which is prepared by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. However, it's much more useful from our local standpoint to identify what critters we have and where the areas are for them. Basically, there aren't a lot of different critters that we have to deal with this time around. There is a different stream typing mechanism that has been instituted by the Department of Natural Resources. Our current set of ordinances utilized an interim set of stream typing. We're going to be utilizing the one that's been established by the state. The other keynote is the delisting of the bald eagle. We still need to identify where there's areas of roost trees or breeding areas, but generally the Department of Fish and Wildlife is no longer engaged or interested in where there are eagles near potential development. The feds, through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is still interested. However, they require a developer to do a self-assessment. So, I'm not sure what the trigger mechanism is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would get engaged, but we will still identify roost trees and that type of thing. Next section is geologically hazardous areas. Relatively little change to this section is being proposed. I am changing the terminology from sensitive to hazardous. We use sensitive in our 2005 update. Hazardous seems to be the word that is most commonly used at the state level, and any documentation that I've seen, we'd like to be consistent with that. So we're going to be shifting the hazardous. Also in the 2005 update, tsunami zones were inconclusive at the time. We do have some information from the DNR that we'll utilize in identifying the modest impact that tsunamis may have on Crescent Harbor. So we'll show that. That landslide, by the way, was not in the city of Oak Harbor either. So critical aquifer recharge areas, very little change again. That hasn't shifted too much. We still have, we did add a goal statement which wasn't in there before, and then the land use regulations as far as the type of uses that are regulated when it's a high susceptible aquifer recharge area have not changed as far as the state is concerned. So we're going to maintain what we have as far as that is concerned for us. Now section 3 as far as consistency. I went through our current comp plan and reviewed the goals and policies that were pertinent to our critical areas. I think there's an attachment that goes into a lot of detail as far as how we are implementing those goals and policies in our comp plan and exactly what elements are affected by this update. And the other one of importance is our Shoreline Master Program. Back in 2005, the state said, well, as you do your critical areas update, the critical areas update will take jurisdiction in the Shoreline Master, in the shoreline jurisdiction, which is 200 feet from the ordinary high water mark. Until you get your Shoreline Master Program updated to the most recent DOE guidelines, which I think was about 2010 or 11, which we did in 2013. We did adopt our Shoreline Master Program, but we deferred back again to the critical area ordinances in our code as guidance for critical areas within the shoreline. There are some exceptions. I did include that text as part of one of your attachments if you'd like to look at what those specific exceptions are within the shoreline area, but typically it's going to be what's in Title 20 that will guide what's in the shoreline. And the last section I'd like to just address is what we anticipate as far as next steps are concerned. We did present to the Planning Commission last night. This is a little different than what's in your packet today, simply because we're going to extend it out a little bit longer so there's more time for review, because we just felt that there'd be more time to adequately understand what is being proposed. So we will bring back a draft of our proposed amendments to the council workshop in May, and also have another discussion opportunity in June, and then we'll be gearing up for a July adoption for this set of amendments to our code. And then also based on the recommendation from the Planning Commission. With that, I would be happy to try to answer any of your questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Lipper. Great from the council. Ms. Westiger.
So does this require the on just the last slide, the public hearing for the planning commission and for the city council? Is that
Yes.
standard
Yeah.
required for this?
Yeah. Planning commission will have a public hearing, they will send a recommendation forth to you.
And then council will hold another public hearing? So
Yes.
Two. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something?
Absolutely, please do.
So, I was thinking maybe context might be helpful. You might be saying to yourself, why does any of this matter? And I think the simplest way to think about it is that not all property is created equal, right? So we have some properties in town, the majority of them, in fact, don't have any critical areas. So then, in that case, just our regular rules apply. It's pretty much business as normal. Some properties have these critical areas on them, a wetland or fish habitat area. Some of them are fortunate and have more than one critical area, a steep slope, and it's in the shoreline area. And so when we're in those unique situations, we need unique rules that tell us how do we respond to that, and how does the property owner know what to do when he or she wants to build something on the property. That's what all of these rules do for you. The other really important thing that they do is it gives us a mechanism to say, how do we make sure that there's still a reasonable economic use of this property if it is overburdened by a critical area. So if it has a lot of wetlands in it, or it has a lot of these other features in it that are critical areas that we have an obligation to protect under state law, we can't do that at the exclusion of any economic use of the property. That's a regulatory takings, and obviously that's a no-no. So built into this in the title or chapter 2012 that Dennis mentioned at the beginning are those escape mechanisms that let us make sure that there is some way for that property to be put to use. That's the context for all of these things. Not all the properties are equal. Some of them have these unique areas. We have an obligation to protect them, but we also have an obligation to figure out how people can use their property. This gets you through that chain of sequences and gets you to the end point of saying, this is how we can improve a project. That's what this is all about.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I may have gone over this a lot. Back to the beginning of time, who designates, obviously with the flood is easy with the FEMA, with the flood maps. You know, that's an agency that does that map. But who, as far as other critical areas for wildlife, like you said, shoreline slopes, who actually designates that designation? Is it us? Is it the state? Is it a combination?
It can be a combination at times. I think one of the things that guide us is using an state mandated best available science, whether that's a local consultant that has to come out and look at a property and do a wetland delineation. That would be best available science for that wetland. Typically, the state has the best available science at our for our use for habitats. Department of Fish and Wildlife, like I mentioned, ecology has a guiding ordinance, a model ordinance that we can utilize. So typically it's the state agencies that have the best available science, the resources that we need to tap into.
But in terms of identifying where those things are in your community, some of that is at the state level. They may have a map which tells us that this is where the geological hazardous areas are, right? But also when we initially as a city had to put into place critical areas codes in the mid to late 1990s, we had to go through a lot of that effort ourselves, and you pull from all sorts of data sources. So for instance, there's a thing out there known as the National Wetland Inventory map, right? Pretty old map, but sometime way back when, people started mapping where the wetlands were, and so we build our information base from those things, and then site by site, it's supplemented, as Dennis said, by that individual report that's done. So maybe the map says, well, we think a wetland is about this big, and when they do the site study, we figure out that it's only really this big, and then we update our map so that we have the most accurate information available.
So that was going to be my next question. What if it's protesters that something may need to change? Like if, you know, our environment is always changing. If you think, you know, your property is in a, you know, critical area for a worm, Like, is there a way, I mean, does that change often, our maps or our critical
It doesn't
areas,
change
or
very
how?
often. Critical areas tend to grow rather than recede, although they certainly can recede. If the hydrologic source, that water source which is feeding the wetland somehow goes away, then over time the wetland characteristics will diminish and it won't be a wetland anymore. Great example of the flip side of that coin is that there is now more wetland in Friend Marsh than there was when I first got here. Right, so there was a large portion of that area which was actually upland, was not wetland. And the most recent time that we did a city study demonstrated that there is more wetland forming in that area. So you're right, it does change, but there's always a mechanism for a more focused study to take place to say, yes, this is a critical area, or no, it's not a critical area. So you don't have to rely just on that gross level mapping that was done a long time ago.
Any further questions? On the protection of the critical aquifer recharge areas, according to the report, or as far as I know, we get our water from Anacortes. But according to the report, 99% of the water comes from Anacortes. Therefore, it means that the water pump in the cities are still working. What are those areas that the water pump is still being used or is still current?
As far as the critical aquifer recharge areas,
Yeah.
well, it's for communities that receive their water from the groundwater. There's a requirement that they protect that water, and the best way to do that is to identify what type of land uses you're actually putting above those aquifers that wouldn't provide contaminants that would leach down into that groundwater. And contamination, as you mentioned, we receive most of our water from Anacortes, so we're not really impacted by the requirement to have, regulations for critical aquifer recharge areas, but we do have some areas to the north of the city that we just need to identify and make sure that no dangerous land uses are placed on there.
I think
So
Mrs.
there's
Rosen's
no-
going to chime in about the wells.
Yes, about the wells. We do have some emergency wells that we have to operate and run every month and exercise those so that we make sure that they are operational in the event we need them in an emergency. So that's that 1% that doesn't come from Anacortes.
Okay, so those pumps are not near or around any critical areas
No.
that they had to protect. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any further questions? If not,
All right.
Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen, Mr. LaFerber, Mr. Parker.
Thanks.
The next one is on public safety. From the police department, police motorcycle program and equipment surplus. Coming to the table, Chief Dresker.
Thank you. I'm gonna have him pull up a site real quick for us. Is that it? That's okay. If that's what you got. Are we waiting? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem and council members, thank you for allowing me to speak. So I'm here to talk to you about putting a motorcycle back, or taking it out of surplus and putting it back into regular fleet. Before I get into detail on that, I want to thank Kathy and Sandra for all the help they've done. I think I overtaxed Sandra. She's almost like an employee for me, I guess. So, but they do wonderful work, and they're kind of the key holders, so to speak, for our vehicles. So I very much appreciate that. So just a real quick summary. Back in 2007 or 2008, the city bought two motorcycles. These two here, and they're 2008 Honda ST 1300 motorcycles. They were used for 2 or 3 years and then basically not used after that. me being new here, I don't know all the details, but I can tell you, I think there was a lot of changeover in the department, some staffing issues, different things like that, and they just got parked. The unique thing about motorcycles is in the olden days, back when I was first starting, you could ride it without having, as long as you had your endorsement, a lot of departments let you ride. Nowadays, best practice is that they go through a 2-week motorcycle school this Criminal Justice Training Commission puts on. And the department had 2 officers that are still working here that have been through that school. One is now a sergeant, and then one of them is Officer Tony Slowick. And so, again, jumping ahead, in July of 2016, Interim Chief Gallagher saw that they'd been sitting around. We had a need for a new jail van. Needed to come up with some money for that. There was replacement money being put in for the motorcycles in the replacement fund. And it built up to, I think, a semi-decent amount. And that money was taken out and then utilized as part of the purchase to purchase this new jail van, which was a good decision. The motorcycles were going to be put in surplus and sold. They ended up going into surplus, and I think on January 5th they'd kind of been up for sale. And of course, I came here in the middle of October. They haven't sold. And what we thought we might be able to get for them, I think we're even down to about half of that based on studies we've done, people we've talked to. There's just I think a lot of supply out there and not as much demand. So what we have is 2 really good shaped motorcycles sitting around. One I think has 8,000 miles, one has about 10, something like that.
7,500 and 11,800.
Okay. They're in excellent condition, and simply what I want to do is take one of the motorcycles out of surplus, put it back into fleet status for right now. We'll still continue with the sale of the other motorcycle, and we will not be putting back into replacement fund for the one that we would take and put back into fleet. We would just utilize it until it was determined we no longer had a useful purpose for it, or it was at the point where maintenance required us to either make a decision to repair it or just then put it up for sale. So we're in a unique position to be able to use it right now, and there's really no lose situation in this. I think you've got the brief on it, but less than about $500 a year is what we'd require for insurance for this vehicle. So that's really the key out here, because we'll have to pay that, and if we didn't put it back in, we wouldn't have to. Now, there's also an estimate of a total of $1,200 to $2,200 for gas, insurance, and maintenance. Again, $500 of that's insurance. The gas and maintenance certainly we'll have to do, but Officer Slowick right now is in what we call a special services officer position. So we have that extra body we can assign to different tasks. So part of his job is working some traffic. You know, if I had a motorcycle, I'd probably put him in a parade if we could, because I think that's probably where this was taken. Because there is some PR benefit, I think, to a motorcycle, and there is a different visibility factor you get sometimes in the city with that. But we're in a position now where Officer Slowick will be doing some assorted different functions for us where the motorcycle can be used. He won't have to utilize a patrol vehicle that's an SUV that we have. He won't have to utilize that, so the wear and tear on those will be diminished, because when he can, he'd utilize the motorcycle. And it holds up a lot better. Not that the cars don't, but it just won't be putting that or using that gas. So for us, really, with Officer Slowick, he's already checked into getting some recertification, working with Skagit County. He's got all the equipment left over. He's in a position right now that he can make use of it. And so I'm simply, you know, I say simply, but sometimes that backfires. I'm simply wanting to return it to a fleet status. And I can't tell you how long, because of the position and changes that may occur. It could be for 4 months. It could be for 2 years. It just depends. But the nice thing about it is if we then determine we no longer, because I probably, or at least at this point, I would not send somebody back through that class unless we determined to have a better plan for it. But right now, we have somebody who can make use of it. It'll actually save us money, in my belief, in use because of not using the SUV. It'll free up those SUVs for the rotational patrol, because they get used hard on the rotational patrol. And then when we're ready to sell it again because we're not using it, then we just put it back on surplus status and we put it up for sale. Unfortunately, we're not going to see the value we want, and that's another benefit. Whatever money we paid in the beginning, we still have use of this vehicle to drain some of that money that we actually put in the initial purchase. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Did I forget anything?
Just that because it took a council action to surplus it, we're gonna ask council to take it off of surplus and put it back in service. So that'll be on your next agenda.
Yeah, and I may not be at that meeting, so Kathy will do that, but I wanted to come here and chat with you and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. And you can't write it if you're going to ask that, so.
Ms. Amber?
Can you sell the surplus one to the general public, or do you have to go through a state agency?
Well, Senator Kathy could probably answer that better. I think what we want to try to do is sell it to law enforcement. If we don't, we'd have to strip it of any law enforcement decals and radios, because right now it's fully outfitted. It's got a police radio on it. It's got.
And I can't buy it?
No.
You're in line second after me.
Not in its current state, but if need be, when the city has an auction again, we would strip it and we could put it in an auction, as we do our other vehicles.
And if we sell the one and we don't sell it to a police agency and we end up stripping that stuff, then it would give us additional, if we still have this for some reason, if a radio went bad, we just put that radio onto this, that kind of thing.
So we only have 7,000 miles on one and 11 on the other? Just broken in.
Yeah, and I've looked around and there's other motorcycles out there for sale with, about the same mileage, and they're just, I don't know what the deal is. Like I said, I think there's an oversupply for an under demand on what's out there for this.
Thank you. No further questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you,
Mr. Ross.
Thanks.
Now we're coming to the time for the City Council. Let me ask Dr. Merriman for this portion of the agenda bill. This will be the time for the council to bring up any items that they wish to.
That's correct. This came out of the council retreat about having an open period for discussion. And so we set aside this time for you to be able to do that.
Mr.
I have
Cervicchia.
to duck out in a moment, but I just want to restate, I talked to Dr. Merriman earlier today and this concept has come up, but when I saw of the dig once ordinance, or anytime we have to open up the ground, make sure we're putting in conduit specifically for future utilities, and specifically when I think of utilities, I'm thinking of communication fiber. When I saw the Regatta Crescent Harbor road, even though it's not a large section, it's an example of that ground is going to be entirely open and available, even if it's just whatever, I don't know what an ordinance would call for, 6-inch, 8-inch conduit that just lays in there dormant. It just seems to make sense. And that's maybe a policy decision we need to get a little bit more motivated about then as a council to, I know other communities have ordinances like that. The dig once ordinance that we encountered at the technology summit, so.
Ms. Munn?
To tail on to that, we're going to have Windjammer Park, and if we have an envision of eventually maybe having Wi-Fi down there or something, then when it's dug up, we need to put in those conduits too. And maybe people can't think of it, but a lot of people can't let go of this, and if they're going to watch their kids play, then you get them down to the park and the parents can still do some business or whatever. But if it's dug up and we've already got the archaeologists there, let's put anything that we need to put in there. And the second item is AWC conference in June is open for registration. So if we all want to be in the same hotel, we need to say who's going and get a reservation in early. But it opened up, I think, like last Friday or Thursday.
What is
So,
what are the
Contact
dates?
person is Ms. Tess, Nicole, that's right.
I've already taken care of it.
Okay.
What's the location?
Vancouver, Washington.
And what are the dates?
20th to the 24th, I believe. I'm not looking at a calendar, so
It's
that's
one of
just
our
my best
second
guess.
council meeting is that week.
Any other items? Ms. Hanson?
I do. Joel and Beth brought up really good points about preparing for the future need for technology. I remember one of the the really cool things about the Pioneer Way improvement was that there was going to be electricity run to all the things, and it turns out for events and stuff like that there's not enough amps. So while there is electricity, there's still a need for generators and things like that. So in theory, that was a good idea, but I think that we need to really be thinking way into the future and I don't want to say overdo it, but plan accordingly. And to staff, thank you for including all the info in our packet. That was very, very nice to be able to have the packet info for our workshop. And just for a little fun historical fact, on this day, April 26th, in 1976, Rich Tiehouse came to work for the city. So you guys can do the math there. I think that makes him, I'm pretty sure he was like 12 or something. There weren't child labor laws back in the day. But I think that makes him our longest standing employee. It's 41 years today or something like that. So pretty significant. I just thought that was interesting and wanted to share.
Thank you. Anything else? I would like to extend a commendation to the public safety personnel, police department for responding that incident where nobody got hurt, nobody died. Thank you very much for it. And then the fire department, and they responded to that fire. They were able to pull out 2 people. Unfortunately, one did not survive. So thank you for the fire department. Chip Merrill's not here. Okay. Anything else? Ms. Munns?
I had a lot of public comment about how well run they thought the marathon was, how the routes were marked very, very well, easy to distinguish. But I had a lot of people come up that knew I was connected and said, wow, they thought this was really, really well done. And they just wanted staff to know. And so thanks to staff and Horsewell.
There's a number of staff that put a lot of work into that. We'll have a list of everybody to thank.
Oh, good, good.
So, but it was, I got an opportunity to be down at the finish line there, and it's, to see people smiling, and they just ran 26 miles, and everybody's, I don't know how they do that, but it was a fun day, and I think people had a good time down there.
Tons of volunteers down here too. Tons of volunteers, not just us, but staff and on your day off. It was really
5:30 in the morning, volunteers at Mass Lake, and they had smiles on their faces, and the Navy personnel were so thankful to be asked that they could contribute to the community. They were just ecstatic about it. And then they were leaving to go to another area to volunteer. So they had planned out their day around this. So I think kudos to everyone for that.
Anything else? If not, this concludes our special workshop meeting. Thank you, everyone.